right. Thank you very much. I just spent my entire day setting up that soundboard and my camera to film, so I hope that was worth it. Thank you. Thank you. My name's Longian Hobart, and what I thought I'd do is just film a few videos about the musings I have in life, generally about self-development, because, you know, that's just something I enjoy. And this first video is about the concept of selfishness. For the last few years, well, probably more than that, for many, many years, I've wanted to write a book called For You. Now, please don't steal that title if you're watching this video, because that would be very sad. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. It's mine. Don't do it. And the whole concept of this book I eventually want to write is I believe that people need to come to understand that all decisions in which they make in their life should ultimately be selfish, and that everything we do in this life is for you yourself. So that might sound obvious, but if I help paint some situations where people don't live this way, you'll understand me better. To be very clear, right, the concept we're covering today is I believe that everybody should embrace the fact that everything you do is intrinsically selfish, and acknowledging this, which is actually the most important part, it'll let you take responsibility for your own actions and your own consequences, which will actually help motivate you and will help you sleep at night, which is something we'll talk about in this video too. So what's the dangers of not being congruent to this way of thinking? Well, it's that you can start developing this self-defeating narrative, okay? And there's actually two consequences to this. The first consequence is that you lose agency. And the second one is that you start to develop animosity towards other people who you deem to have made a decision for you. So have you ever been in this situation where you tell yourself, oh, I'm only doing this because someone else told me to do that, and I don't really want to be doing it, but I'll do it anyway because they're forcing me to do it? Have you sort of had something like that before? I've got 3 examples here as well that I've written that might make it a bit clearer, right? So this is a very classic one, especially in some ethnic groups, like I can say for Asians, right, as well, where your parents, when you're studying, might have an increased amount of pressure for you to study particular things. This is obviously very common, right? It's a thing where you know, you're in high school and your parents are like, you should be a Dr. Long, and you're like, I don't want to be, and they're like, you have to be. And you know what ends up happening, and why is this bad? The reason it can be bad is that you might accept that decision, blame it on them for having made that decision, right, because of their pressure, and then you hate studying whatever they told you to study. You know, let's say it's medicine, so you got to do ridiculous hours, a lot of studying, and it's just a lot of pain overall. And if that's not something you are congruent with yourself, right, it can be a very hard path. And so what happens is you hate studying that course, but then you start blaming your parents for having made you do that. And of course, what happens is you start to build a lot of hatred and animosity towards your parents, which is obviously not ideal. A similar situation is, for example, in the workplace, where, you know, as an employee, you might be asked to do something by your boss, and you might not truly understand why they're telling you to do it, but you do it anyway because it's your job and you have to, and you'll lose your job if you don't. So you do it. You do it begrudgingly so. That's also not good, because what happens is, obviously, over time, you develop a very adversarial relationship with your boss, and you don't respect their opinion, etc. One more example I've got here is, let's just say your partner tells you to clean the kitchen and you don't want to do it. You can imagine, right? Your girlfriend is like, oh, you know, Long, go clean the kitchen. And you're like, I don't want to do it. But then you end up doing it anyway. But in the back of your head as you're scrubbing, you're like, oh, it's because my girlfriend told me to clean the stove. And so what happens, just on that note, like a similar example would be, you know, if you're a kid growing up or whatever, and your parents are telling you to take out the trash and you don't want to do it. Like, it seems like an inconsequential small thing, right? Even if you don't want to do it. But what happens is, obviously, over time, it builds into a lot of resentment for the individual. So, for example, like that, and with your girlfriend, right, telling you to clean the kitchen, what happens over time is you start to develop this understanding of her as some annoying, nagging woman, right? Telling you to do stuff that you don't want to do. And of course, that's not going to lead to a very healthy relationship, is it? Let me just also preface this by saying that in those circumstances, I'm not saying that the other person is right or wrong, okay? But what I'm saying is if you don't acknowledge the actions you actually take, that can be very bad. Because it could be true that your girlfriend is actually really annoying, right? And is just nagging the hell out of you. If that is the case, then they're probably just the wrong person for you. But I think in general, most of the time, it actually has to do with the person themselves and how they're viewing that the decision being bestowed upon them rather than the other person being wrong. In those three circumstances, why are they negative? I mean, I brushed over them, but let's just be very clear. With the studying one, right? If you hate the course, you're going to blame your parents for making you take that course. And you're going to have and you see this a lot, you're going to have a love-hate relationship with your parents. And that can be very damaging. That's obviously the animosity that has been fostered. The other part to that is also you lose your agency. You feel like you've made such a big decision in your life because of your parents. It's like you're a puppet, right? And do you want to be a puppet? Probably not, right? I'll assume you don't want to be a puppet. So what happens is if you have all these circumstances, right, in which you are letting other people make the decision for you and you're simply just flowing through the actions, you're literally a puppet. And the more you fall into this rhetoric, right, and this narrative in which you're telling yourself that you are a puppet, the more you become a puppet. So it's a very dangerous pathway to go down. Similarly, with the boss one, I find this really common in that a lot of times people have a lot of resentment towards their boss being told to do things, even though their boss is right. So that might be more of an ego thing as well, which we can talk about another day. But yeah, obviously you can understand why there's a lot of negative consequences that can come from just, blindly following your boss's instructions with a negative attitude. Here's the kicker for all this, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to be right by taking an action for yourself, right? But it means that you're making a decision for yourself. And being right is something we can talk about in a future video. So if we're talking about those three situations again, how can we reframe those into like a more positive situation? So let's talk about the studying one, for example, okay? Now, this is very real for a lot of different cultures where a lot of parents do put a lot of pressure onto their kids to study particular things. And as the child, I mean, I'm ethnic too. I felt a tiny bit of it. Not as bad as a lot of people, for sure, but I did have some level of it. At some level, I think you have to appreciate the fact that people only have, cultures and families only have that level of pressure because they care. Like, I'm sure, parents don't really want their kids to work their butts off and, get super depressed to become a doctor for no reason. It's because they want them to have a good life, have good status, make good money, and be secure. Okay, obviously there might be some other level of social proofing too, right? But I don't think that's totally separate from the positive sides of it too. Anyway, going back a tiny bit, studying, okay? I think you need to reframe it to realize that you are making a decision to study, let's say, medicine because you want to make your parents happy, right? You're not doing it because they're forcing you to do it. You could very easily say no. You are a human with your own agency, right? Especially unless you're living in some crazy country, which I don't even know, like let's say in Australia, where we are, right? Sorry, where I am. There's no one else here. You can very easily leave any situation, right? No one is forcing you to do anything, and telling yourself that you're being forced to do things is only going to detriment your own mentality. You're not doing yourself any favors by thinking that way. So let's, again, with the studying one, right? You can make a decision to understand that you are taking an action to go to university to study medicine because you do actually value culture, right? You do value your parents' input, and you do value their happiness too. Okay, and that in itself is actually really powerful, because then when you're studying at university, you know deep down that you're actually doing it for yourself. You're not doing it because, you know, parents forced you. It's because, you know, you're doing it for yourself. All right. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. Of course, if you truly feel that your parents' suggestion of, you know, studying medicine does not resonate with you at all, then what you need is courage to not make that decision, right? And as to not take that action and to make a decision against that, which is something else we can talk about in the future. But the last thing you want is to get stuck in a situation where you're studying something, blaming your parents for it, not having the courage to have made a decision against it, or not having the awareness to have made a decision for it as well. With the boss one, right? If you're doing it because it's just your job, you obviously won't get the best results, and there'll be a lot of friction because you're doing it for the wrong reasons, or so it feels. The funny thing about the boss one is that a lot of times it can actually be a result of low self-esteem. And it's actually your ego getting in the way. Chances are your boss is probably right. Well, you'd like to think, right, that your boss is right about whatever you're supposed to be doing, because you'd assume they're more educated and more experienced in the whatever business, right? And so a lot of people, I'm sure you can understand, have a problem with authority and have an ego about being told what to do. And so they start to build a resentment against their boss. But the second danger to this is that they can actually cut off the possibility of developing themselves because of their ego. So if they're telling themselves, oh, I'm only doing this because my boss is telling me I wouldn't have done it this way, their ego gets in the way of them actually looking at the results they're achieving or looking at the actions they're doing and understanding if it is actually the best way forward, and that maybe they can change their own thinking to align more of the boss's because it makes sense, right? So that's another danger. You can lose the ability to adapt and improve. Let's go on to the positive side, right? Which is why you want to think this way. Well, it's that you end up doing things better when you do it for yourself, and it helps you sleep at night. The thing you need to realize as well is that you have an understanding of who you are yourself. Whether you think about it consciously or subconsciously, in fact, most of it is actually subconscious, you have a self-image of, you know, who you are subconsciously and consciously, but not as much. And a lot of this understanding is defined by the actions you take. And so if you end up taking a lot of actions which you feel like have been, you know, prescribed to you by other people, your self-image suddenly becomes less defined by you rather than the context, right? The environment in which you exist. And ultimately, the most important thing about understanding that you're making decisions for yourself, right, is that because you're doing it for yourself, you can't blame anyone else. So you have to take full responsibility for all this stuff. And whether your actions lead to success or failure, you win, because you can be at peace with having made your own decision and not having something forced upon you. And ultimately, what this does is it helps you sleep at night. So this is actually the ultimate, I guess, learnings of this video, hopefully, which is that if you can truly make a decision and take ownership of that decision, whether or not it goes to your favor or whatnot, you'll be able to sleep at night because you would have made a decision for yourself and no one forced you to do that. It was for you. Okay, so the one distinction I also want to make about this is that doing something for yourself is not self-preservation. So I'll give you an example. If I put you in a room with yourself and 20 of the people you hold most dear to your heart, right? And I said to you, I'm either going to blow up your head or I'm going to blow up the head of the other 20 people. What would you pick? I mean, I'd like to think that, you know, well, for myself, I would pick for my own head to blow up. But why? Why would I do that? Well, because I couldn't live with myself knowing that I made a decision to blow up the heads of the ones I love. Like, I just wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Obviously, having made that decision, I'd be dead. So it doesn't help me. There's no self-preservation there. And you can see, though, ultimately, that decision is still for myself. The decision to save everybody else is a decision so I can actually live with myself. Oh, well, sorry. I could live with myself, because if I had done the reciprocal and blew everyone's head up, I'd be extremely depressed, and it wouldn't be nice. Okay, that'd be a horrible existence. Another example, or another way to think about this, is actually charity. And this exists on multiple levels. You probably know someone that loves giving to charity. Okay, actually you might know someone that loves giving to charity, but also loves to show it off. This is probably slightly different to talk about, because that might have to do with self-image as well. But if we're talking about charity in general, right, why do people give to charity? So one reason is maybe they do like to posture up, okay, and tell the world that, hey, look, I'm such a great person, right? And also that they can tell themselves that they're a great person, okay? So similarly, you know, the person who gives to charity but doesn't tell anybody, why do they do it? Why do they give to a charity and not tell anybody? Well, it's because obviously they can't sleep at night knowing that they could help the world, but they're not. So the act of giving charity obviously helps this person construct their self-image, which is that I'm doing my part, I'm altruistic, and I'm giving back to the world. And hey, I'm doing my best. That's the story in which they tell themselves, and that helps them sleep at night. The way I feel about it is that there's no absolute altruism, right? Because at the end of the day, it does tie back to some level of selfish desire, which is, making yourself feel okay with the decisions you're making. That's not bad, by the way. I don't say selfishness in a bad way. I mean no negative connotation to the word. I think it's actually very empowering, right? And also on the charity point, I'm not saying that giving, money or being charitable and posting online is a bad thing. I do believe there's actually a net positive benefit to doing things like that. I'm just trying to use this as an example to help you understand the mechanism of why you need to understand why we're doing the things we're doing. So, okay, there was a bit of rambling. There was a lot of different stuff just said then. What does this all really mean? Firstly, it is to acknowledge that everything you do is ultimately for yourself. Whether you're helping other people, whether you're hurting yourself, like in the example of blowing up my own head, right? You're still doing it for yourself. Once you take ownership for your actions and the consequences of those actions, you can start to think about how you can optimize those actions so they align with your true purpose. So this is something we'll have to talk about in the future as well, because it's probably a bigger topic. But the first step is to take ownership of the actions and the consequences and the decision that you are doing something because you want to do it, not because of someone else telling you to do it. You need to stop blaming other people for your own actions. You need to take responsibility for them, okay? That doesn't mean you're always going to be right, okay? Like, you need to check your ego, because sometimes other people's decisions are actually the better decision. But just notice that other people's decisions can become your decisions if you allow them to, if your ego is not in the way. If someone makes a suggestion to you saying, hey, you should go take out the bins or whatever, your reaction should be like, should I actually take out the bins? Is it the right time to take out the bins? Why? Because my house stinks or whatever. And it becomes your decision. Yeah, I should take out the bins. And then you're happy doing it. Yeah, that's a lot to ramble about. And I know it can be a bit esoteric, I guess. It's not so lucid. And that's why I said I'll write the book one day, because I'm still thinking about it. But I thought this initial video would be a good way just to touch on it. So to be as clear as I can be, what I'm really trying to say is that by taking ownership of your actions and decisions, it'll help you sleep at night, because you'll be able to say, you know what, that was my choice. I can't blame anyone else. I can only blame myself. Good or bad, I can only blame myself. And that's actually really powerful, because the last thing you want to do is poison your relationships and reduce your own agency by saying that, well, being the puppet that we spoke about, right? So yeah, that's the first video. Hopefully it made sense. I'll see you soon.